Number 2 for me is going to be the Nuggets. 6-game win streak snapped last night by the Suns. Suns are still a good team. That's why I have them in the top 10 of my power rankings. I'm not going to really hold that against them too much, but they got wins over that 6-game win streak at the Lakers, at the Warriors, and then the Heat and Kings are also a part of that too. So big quality wins over that stretch. Nobody's really worried about the Nuggets. It's get to the playoffs, stay healthy, and then watch what they do there. And then, yeah, I'm putting Boston in at number 1. They're beating the hell out of teams. I know what happened in Cleveland was bad. I mean, they blew a 22-point lead. Dean Wade outscored them in the fourth quarter. I mean, you're never going to see that happen again. I'm concerned about Jason Tatum in the clutch. We've seen that for a while. We've seen that for years. It's been a narrative that is true. But, you know, they got a 7.5-game lead in the East. They were outscoring their opponents by 243 points over that 11-game winning streak. They're not just winning. They're dominating teams in the regular season. And they got 3 guys that can get you over 20 a night. Jrue Holiday is a massive upgrade from Marcus Smart. We've seen that. This team's 3rd in scoring, and, you know, they're tops in three-point shooting and number 1 in rebounding and defensive rating over that win streak, and great defensive team. Like, they do it all. Boston is still the best regular season team right now in the NBA to me. Playoffs, going to be a totally different story, but nobody's really going to argue, guys, that Boston, Denver, top 2 teams in the NBA, the ones that we can trust the most.
You've pulled me in now. There's been 2 comments tonight that you've made that I feel disrespected by personally. I feel like you're kind of finding ways to talk smack, like in a shady way, sneak dissing UConn. Like you're talking about Purdue. Oh, Purdue's better than UConn. You're talking about the upset. You're talking about Marquette going to the Final Four. Excuse me, Brad, is this UConn team not better than last year's UConn team? There was an absolute effing buzzsaw during March Madness.
They are better, and I will say this, Trista. I'm not picking any fights with you. I love you dearly, and I will say this about the Huskies. They're gonna Huskies mush in the NCAA tournament. I think them and Purdue could be on a collision course, assuming they're on opposite ends of the bracket to meet for the national title, the whole enchilada and the whole shebang. And I hope that does play out, because that'll be an epic title game in Arizona. Yeah, you're right. Look, they are better in every facet. There's no doubt about it. Dominic Clingan is the difference maker, especially when he's healthy, and hopefully the foot issues are long in the past and in the rear view. But they are fantastic from the perimeter. They are a better defensive team. They really get after it on the offensive defensive glass. And really, they're almost mirror images of Purdue in terms of their roster construct. You know, not especially deep, but they have the sharpshooters from outside to perfectly balance and complement the enormous, giant presence in the middle. Zach Edey for Purdue, Dominic Clingan, of course, for UConn. So those 2 Titans going toe-to-toe would be must-see TV in a national title game. I think it will come down to the final seconds.
One of the themes it felt like of baseball was younger teams with smaller payrolls that were having a ton of success. I know in the end the Rangers ruined it with all the money they spent, and they kind of broke that whole thing off. But I mean, obviously the Orioles, like we talked about, the Diamondbacks were one. This whole show fell in love with the Reds once they started skyrocketing the way that they were. Is there any team that could now maybe fall into that category this year that takes that next step? Or maybe just out of that bunch, could that be a theme again where multiple lower payroll younger teams really have some success? I mean, obviously the Orioles are a very popular one, but are there any maybe besides that this year where we watch them take another jump?
Yeah, it's very rare, especially this last decade, to see a team that's so dependent on analytics and not at all dependent on payroll really make it to the finish line. You know, Tampa Bay Rays are the first team that come to mind. Tampa Bay Rays have been one of the more dominant teams when it comes to regular seasons over the past decade plus. Problem is they have fallen short in the playoffs time and time again. I personally am under the belief that it's got to be a balance. You got to have a balance of payroll, and you got to have a balance of farm system scouting. And so a lot of times we see teams at the bottom of the payroll, and they aren't able to get to that finish line. By that same token, we see a lot of teams that are super high in payroll. San Diego Padres last year, the New York Mets of last year, they're so high in payroll, but they lose focus in other departments that they also fall short. So I think it's got to be a balance. If you're looking at like payrolls right now, Pirates, in my opinion, I like the Pirates this year. I really do. And I hate to even put them in a category of a team that's not spending money, because this team finally finally is spending money. They extended Key Brian Hayes a couple of years ago. They extended Brian Reynolds last season, and they extended their ace in Mitch Keller. O'Neal Cruz is back and healthy, going to be 100% on opening day. They still have guys like Jack Swinski, Andrew McCutchen. I don't love their pitching, but that lineup, Henry Davis, that lineup, just watch out for the Pirates this year, especially in that National League Central.
I love both of these guys. I love this entire team, right? I kind of want chalk this season. Never mind. I was going to say I would love to see Dodgers-Braves, and I do want to see Dodgers-Braves in the postseason, but I want to see that in the DS because I want to see the winner of that in the CS against my Chicago Cubbies, who was I still just like a little hungover from vacation, or did Danny Vietti say they were the most complete team? He said they were the most complete team in the NL Central, but I'll take it. I would have to go at the same price, Ronald Acuna, most hits, because so Shohei Ohtani, I completely agree with everything that T just said right there, but he's the best baseball player of our generation. But he's not going to pitch this year. So now, like, Ronald Acuna, in my opinion, is the best player in all of baseball, just because you look at the stolen base numbers, you look at what he could do with the bat. I mean, he's just the most complete player. Like, he's like you created a player in MLB The Show, and you juice everything up to 99s or 100s. Austin Riley is great, too, and with all that protection, I mean, he could have like 150-plus RBIs this season. But I'll go with Ronald Acuna, who every year could be the MVP as long as he stays healthy. Like, that's the only case you can make against Acuna. Oh, he got hurt this year, so, you know, can't win any awards. I would go with Ronald Acuna most hits, 9-1.
Nick will switch back quickly. Would you rather, Mr. Asher, bet the Thunder or the T-Wolves in a 7-game series? Would you rather?
God, it's tough because both these teams are young. You worry about playoff experience when you go to the playoffs. But the problem is they're both kind of in similar situations where technically Minnesota maybe has a little bit more. The thing and the advantage that the Timberwolves have is that length. They're the best defensive team in the NBA. You've got the leadership at point guard and Mike Conley. You've got depth. You got guys like Naz Reid coming off the bench that play significant minutes for them, that have significant roles. Rudy Gobert is a defensive monster. So if you've got him just pestering Chet Holmgren the entire time, that's a major advantage that you're going to bring in there. Anthony Edwards can go and get you buckets, so he'd kind of match up with SGA in terms of the scorers, the guys that are go-to, the guys that take over. You got to have somebody that can take over a game when you're in those types of situations in the playoffs. I love both those teams. Minnesota struggled a little bit. They're a middle-of-the-pack offensive team in the NBA, but the game slows down. It gets a little bit more physical in the playoffs. Rotations get a little bit shorter. It's a tough lean for me, but I think I'd lead the Minnesota Timberwolves now over the Thunder in a 7-game series. But, man, it's close. I love both those teams. You know, honestly, like, the more and more guys that I sit here and look at this, I think maybe they are going to make some noise. I mean,